Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I lost my father just 20 days ago, and the pain is still raw. As I sit here going through his old photographs, I can't help but remember all the stories he used to tell us. He was an amazing storyteller, and each tale had a lesson hidden within. But there's one story that always stood out to me, one that showed me exactly why I considered him my hero. My father was the youngest of 9 siblings, 6 brothers and 2 sisters. Being the baby of the family, he was loved and pampered by everyone. But we shared one particular trait that often got us into trouble: our short temper. In his youth, my father was known throughout the village for his volatile nature. The story takes place when he was 19. His second eldest sister had just married a military man who was stationed at the Indian border. As was common in our culture, my aunt moved in with her in-laws while her husband served the country. Everything seemed fine at first until her brother-in-law started showing his true colors. The brother-in-law was a monster in human form. Standing at 6'8", he was built like a tank and had never lost a fight. He was a local goon who made money through extortion and was known for assaulting women. No one dared to stand up to him, and the police were too scared to intervene. One day my cousin, who was 18 at the time, came to our house looking distressed. He pulled my father aside and nervously told him about our aunt's situation. My cousin revealed that the brother-in-law had been forcing himself on her and threatening her for weeks. He explained how the family knew but remained silent out of fear. My father's face turned red with rage as he listened. When my cousin finished speaking, my father asked how long this had been happening. My cousin admitted that it had been going on for weeks, and our aunt had only confided in him because she was at her breaking point. My father knew he couldn't take on this giant alone. He gathered his friends and some of our cousins that evening at our family home. He declared that the beast needed to be taught a lesson. One of his friends expressed concern about the brother-in-law's size and his gang, but my father insisted they needed to be smart about it. He explained that their target got drunk every evening at the local bar, suggesting that would be their best chance. They had no real plan beyond ambushing him. That evening they all had a few drinks for courage and waited in the dark village roads where the street lights barely worked. When they saw him stumbling home drunk, they attacked. But even drunk, the brother-in-law was a formidable opponent. What they didn't expect was that his gang members were following him that night. The scene quickly turned into chaos. In the heat of the moment, my father spotted a wooden plank on the ground. Without thinking twice, he swung it with all his might, connecting directly with the brother-in-law's head. Someone in the distance shouted a warning about backup arriving with weapons. My father and his friends scattered into the night. He made it home, quickly showered, and went to bed. The next morning, while he was telling his mother about the fight, his eldest brother rushed in to warn him that the police were looking for him. Someone had witnessed him hitting the brother-in-law with a plank. My grandmother immediately advised him to leave town until things cooled down. My father spent a few weeks hiding in various relatives' homes, but the food was terrible compared to my grandmother's cooking. Finally, he'd had enough, complaining that he might as well turn himself in if he had to eat another bland meal. And that's exactly what he did. He walked into the police station and surrendered, but not before demanding a proper meal. The police were so amused by his audacity that they actually ordered food for him. The brother-in-law survived the initial attack but was never the same. The head injury caused complications that eventually led to his death a few months later. The case against my father was dismissed due to lack of evidence. No one in the village was willing to testify against the man who finally stood up to the terror that had plagued their women for so long. My father never regretted what he did. In fact, he would always end this story by proudly stating that after that night, not a single woman in our village was ever harassed again. There are probably many more such stories that died with him, but this one will live on through me. I've lived in my grandfather's house for the past 5 years, ever since he passed away. He left it to me in his will, knowing how much I love the place and all the memories we created there. It's a modest two-story home in some neighborhood with a single-car driveway that I've always kept clear until these new neighbors moved in next door about 6 months ago. They're this couple who think they own the whole street. At first, they seemed normal enough, but within a week, they started using my driveway as their personal parking spot. See, they have 3 cars, but only space for 2 in their own driveway, and instead of parking their third car on the street like a normal person, they decided my driveway was their solution. The first time it happened, I tried to be nice about it. I politely told them I needed to get my car out for work. The wife apologized and promised to move it right away, but then it kept happening. Every other night, I'd find their car blocking my driveway. I left notes, I knocked on their door multiple times, I even tried reasoning with them. One day, I tried explaining to them that while I understood they had 3 cars, they couldn't keep blocking my driveway since I needed to leave for work in the morning. The husband brushed me off, saying it was just overnight and I could always knock if I needed to leave. When I pointed out that it was my driveway and I shouldn't have to ask permission to use it, the wife had the nerve to complain about where else they were supposed to park, whining that the street was so far away. The street was literally 20 feet from their house. I tried calling the towing company a few times. They'd come and remove the car, but the couple would just pay the fine and go right back to doing it. They even had the nerve to tell me I was being unreasonable and unneighborly. That's when I remembered something my grandfather taught me years ago. He used to work as a maintenance supervisor at an ice rink, and he knew all sorts of tricks about ice and water. One winter, when some kids kept stealing his newspaper, he showed me how to create a nearly invisible sheet of ice that would last for days, even in above freezing temperatures. After the 5th time they got their car towed and parked in my driveway again the very next day, I decided it was time. I waited until 2 a.m. when I was sure they were asleep. The temperature was perfect, just above freezing. I filled my grandfather's old industrial sprayer with water and a special solution he had taught me about. It was completely clear and would freeze at a higher temperature than regular water. I carefully sprayed their car, making sure to get every inch of it, including all the doors, windows, and locks. By morning, their car was encased in a crystal clear layer of ice, so smooth it was almost invisible. This solution wouldn't melt like regular ice. It would stay frozen solid for days, even in warmer weather. The next morning, I woke up early just to watch the show. The husband came out first, completely baffled when he couldn't open any of the doors. His wife joined him shortly after, and they both stood there trying to figure out why their car was covered in ice when it wasn't even that cold. They tried everything: hot water, which just ran off, ice scrapers, which couldn't get a grip on the smooth surface, even a hairdryer, which barely made a dent. They had to call in to work because they couldn't get into their car. The other neighbors watched from their windows, and I could see them trying not to laugh. Everyone had dealt with this couple's entitled behavior at some point. The wife was getting hysterical, insisting that someone must have done this on purpose and that it wasn't natural. The husband threatened to call the police, and they did. When the police arrived, they were just as confused as everyone else. There was no evidence of vandalism, just a mysterious layer of ice that nobody could explain. The responding officer could barely keep a straight face as he tried to explain to the increasingly frustrated wife that there wasn't much they could do about ice. It took 4 days for the ice to finally melt enough for them to get into their car. During those 4 days, I enjoyed the peaceful use of my own driveway. They never parked in my driveway again. In fact, they started parking their third car 3 houses down the street, where they should have been parking it all along. They still give me suspicious looks, especially when the weather gets cold, but they can't prove anything. My other neighbors occasionally give me knowing smiles, but no one's ever said a word about it. The couple eventually moved away 6 months later, apparently unable to handle the weird supernatural events that happened to their car. I heard them telling their real estate agent that the neighborhood was haunted. Back in the early 90s, I was working at this convenience store deli chain in New England. It wasn't my dream job, but I needed to pay my way through college. I started as a regular clerk, but within 6 months, I was practically running the place. The actual assistant store manager had quit, and instead of promoting me officially, my boss just dumped all the responsibilities on me without the title or pay raise. I was doing everything: inventory management, placing orders, training new employees, and handling the accounting. On top of that, I was usually the only person working the floor, manning both the register and the deli counter. It was exhausting, but I kept at it, hoping it would lead to something better. One busy afternoon, this woman came in. I was restocking shelves, serving deli customers, and running the register all by myself. Little did I know she was a secret shopper. A few days later, my boss called me into his office waving a report in his hand. My boss told me that I had failed the secret shopper evaluation. When I asked him how that was possible, he explained that I hadn't offered the shopper anything from behind the counter. He then told me in no uncertain terms that I needed to offer every single customer something from behind the counter, whether it was tobacco, lottery tickets, or health and beauty items. He emphasized that he didn't care what I offered, as long as I offered something to everyone. I asked him to confirm if he really meant every single customer, and he insisted that yes, there were to be no exceptions. I told him I understood, already forming a plan in my mind. He went back to his office, probably to play solitaire on his computer like he usually did while I ran the store. Not 10 minutes later, our local priest walked in. He was a regular customer, always coming in for bread and occasionally some deli meat. He was wearing his collar as usual, looking every bit the respected religious figure he was. He brought his loaf of bread to the counter, and I started ringing him up. I greeted him and asked if this would be all for his purchase today. When he confirmed it was, I made sure to ask if he was absolutely sure, explaining that we had some lovely items behind the counter that I needed to offer him. I then proceeded to ask if he would be interested in some lottery tickets or perhaps some condoms, adding that if he didn't get lucky with one, he might get lucky with the other. The priest's eyes went wide and his face turned red. He fumbled with his wallet, practically threw the money at me, and hurried out of the store without even waiting for his change. My boss's voice boomed from his office, declaring that I was now exempt from offering behind-the-counter items to customers. I knew I wouldn't get fired. They needed me too much. I was doing the work of 3 people, including half of my boss's job, all while being paid minimum wage. Plus, I had documented everything I did beyond my job description, just in case. A week later, that secret shopper came back. I recognized her this time. She had this smug look that just screamed, "I'm going to catch you doing something wrong." I made sure to offer her every single item behind the counter, describing each one in excruciating detail while a line formed behind her. She never came back to our store again. My boss finally gave me that assistant store manager promotion 2 weeks later, complete with back pay for all the months I'd been doing the job unofficially. Funny how that worked out after the priest incident. I met my ex-husband at a corporate event in 2010. He was charming, successful, and seemed like the perfect gentleman. At the time I was working in marketing and he was in sales. We kept running into each other at industry events, and eventually he asked me out for coffee. We dated for 2 years before getting married and had 3 beautiful children together. Everything seemed perfect on the surface, but by 2018, our marriage had become more of a business arrangement than a loving relationship. We barely talked anymore unless it was about the kids or bills. That Christmas, we decided to visit his sister, who I'd only met once before at our wedding. She lived in another state and we planned to spend a week there. His sister barely acknowledged my existence. When I tried to make conversation, she'd give short answers and quickly walk away. She wouldn't even look me in the eye during dinner. My husband was acting strange too, constantly checking his phone and being weirdly protective of his backpack. At one point, while I was wrapping presents we'd shipped to his sister's house, they both went outside for what felt like forever. I could see them through the window having what looked like an intense conversation. A month before this trip, I'd found a prepaid card in his wallet while looking for a receipt. When I confronted him about it, he claimed it was for work expenses, but something about his nervous demeanor didn't sit right with me. The card had a substantial balance on it, far more than any reasonable work expense would require. I asked him straight out if he was having an affair. He denied it immediately, asking why I would think such a thing. When I mentioned his recent strange behavior, he dismissed my concerns and called me paranoid. But his reaction was too defensive, too rehearsed, like he'd been preparing for this conversation. When we got home from the Christmas trip, something in my gut told me to check his backpack while he was in the shower. Inside, I found 2 rose gold bracelets and a gift bag. They were expensive, the kind you'd buy for someone special. I took the bracelets and hid them in an old shoebox at the back of my closet, buried under winter scarves. Later that day, he came storming into the house, demanding to know where the bracelets were. When I pretended not to know what he was talking about, he claimed they were meant to be my anniversary gift for the following month. I pointed out that I never wore bracelets and actually hated them, something he'd known since our first anniversary when he'd bought me a charm bracelet that I never wore. He just kept insisting I return them, growing more agitated by the minute. When I maintained my ignorance, he stormed out, slamming the door behind him, and we never discussed it again. A few weeks later, while he was sleeping, I managed to get into his phone and found text messages that confirmed my suspicions. He had been having an affair with a co-worker from the accounting department. The messages went back months, full of plans for secret meetings and discussions about their future together. The prepaid card was their way of hiding their shared expenses. We stayed married for 2 more years for financial reasons. We had a joint business and 3 kids in private school. But eventually, we started divorce proceedings. While helping him pack his things, I found the bracelets I'd hidden years ago, still pristine in their original box. Our 15-year-old daughter had always loved jewelry, especially rose gold. That's when I got an idea for the perfect revenge. We'd agreed to have one last Christmas together at the house for the kids' sake. On Christmas morning, while the kids were opening their presents, I watched as our daughter unwrapped the bracelets. I'd repackaged them in a new gift box with a card saying they were a special gift I'd been saving for the right moment. My daughter squealed with delight when she saw them, exclaiming how beautiful they were and how rose gold was her favorite. She immediately put them on and couldn't stop admiring them. My ex-husband's face turned pale. He sat there frozen, staring at the bracelets like he'd seen a ghost. He couldn't say a word without admitting to the affair and revealing himself as a liar he was. The story doesn't end there, though. After the divorce, he moved to another state without even telling our kids. He only contacts them on holidays and birthdays now, sending generic cards with gift cards inside. But our daughter still wears those bracelets almost every day, completely unaware of their history. My ex-husband's sister still reaches out occasionally, trying to maintain a relationship with the kids. During her last visit, she noticed the bracelets on our daughter's wrists. Her face went white and she quickly changed the subject. Turns out she'd known about the affair all along and had even helped him shop for those bracelets that Christmas. She'd gone with him to 3 different jewelry stores until they found the perfect pair. Now, every time she visits, she has to see them sparkling on our daughter's wrists, a constant reminder of how they both betrayed our family. Last month, during my daughter's sweet 16th birthday party, she wore those bracelets along with a new necklace I bought her. My ex-husband's sister was there, and I caught her staring at the bracelets multiple times throughout the evening. When our daughter mentioned how they were her favorite piece of jewelry and she never takes them off, his sister nearly choked on her drink. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.